Hello, this is Kit Silver, and welcome to episode 109.5 of Unsheathed. It's been about 4 months since last we gathered, and we have all kinds of interesting updates.
We've left the land of integers and are going into half numbers.
No guests here today, but we do have our regular lovely hosts.
Hi, I'm an otter.
I'm a fox.
This is KM Hirosaki. Hello. It's good to talk to you all again.
And I'm Kyell Gold, and I'm equally delighted to be back here behind the mic in front of the otter next to the wolf.
Within the mountain bunker.
Within the mountain bunker.
Back in the mountain bunker.
Next to the house that Jack built. Or however that goes.
We are breaking open a new kind of wine to celebrate this episode, and actually, Happy New Year's, everyone! Happy
New Year's.
2025.
We've missed a lot of holidays. I'm about to go into that.
So, we're cracking open a lovely can of 0.5 in honor of 109.5 episode, which has zero alcohol. It's a lovely Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
KM, you've not tried this yet. So
I have not. I do like Pinot Noir. This might shock longtime listeners of the podcast, but I've actually largely given up drinking alcohol. I've allowed myself one special occasion to have some because it was a close friend's birthday, and it's like, you know what? Once in a while for a special occasion isn't going to be the end of the world. But anyway, let's see how this tastes. It smells like wine. That's a good sign.
Can't believe you didn't have alcohol at the amazing Super Bowl victory.
Yeah, I sure didn't. That was a day where I wish I could have been drinking. Oh, that's actually quite pleasant too. The wine, that is. I don't know about the Super Bowl. That wasn't necessarily a pleasant day.
It was pleasant for some of us.
It was pleasant for some of us.
Kyle was waggy he's still waggy. So
He's still been wagging about it. But so we've been gone a while, and it's not just because it's been a holiday season and we've been busy. I'm sure we would have found the time somehow to get around recording. But all right, I'll just get down to brass tacks here. Toward the tail end of last year, the day after Christmas, I wound up having to be hospitalized because it turned out I had gone into sepsis. So I was in the hospital for a while, doing my best to not die of sepsis. And much longer story short, the underlying cause of why I had gone into sepsis took multiple procedures to address, which thankfully worked very well, but which left me with a very complicated and very long and arduous period of recovery from multiple surgeries. I will spare people the gross medical details because, believe me, the more detail I go into, it does get grosser. It was I spent about 3 months just recovering from this, including a month in the hospital. Like I was just it was.
I really can't say how exciting and tail waggy it is to see you energetic and enthusiastic and happy again. Because even when you were out of the hospital, you were very subdued. Like the recovery was taking a lot out of you.
The first couple of days out of the hospital were so disappointing for me because I'm like, I've been waiting to get out of this hospital for a month, and now I'm finally back home, and I barely feel any better. And then it turns out, no, I was actually feeling a lot better, but it just took a few days to appreciate that fact because I could see, I'm like, oh, this is going to be months of this. And it felt like a really long time, but there were milestones along the way, and things got progressively better. And so instead of constantly being like stressed out, exhausted and in pain, I was just exhausted and in pain, and then just exhausted and in mild pain, right? It's like, yeah, it would get better. And there were various aspects of the recovery process that would drop off every few weeks where it's like, oh, here's another thing I never have to deal with again, hopefully.
Yeah.
And
Pause cross.
yeah, and like just by coincidence, I had a follow-up appointment with one of my doctors today, and it was all very good news. And yeah, I'm back to being in one piece and the perky, perspicacious otter that you all know and possibly love.
Oh, definitely. I haven't seen you this waggy since I think it was pretty much Thanksgiving of last year. So
Oh gosh,
it's been a while.
That was like the last good time of my life. That after Thanksgiving was when everything started to go downhill.
We're very glad to have you back.
Yeah.
I do have all kinds of like follow-up questions just about the experience, but if you don't mind me jumping into those.
Not at all. Go right ahead.
I'm kind of curious, wearing our writer's hat.
Yeah.
As a writer, is there anything you're doing now because of what you've been through?
Gosh, this is definitely going to be something that I carry with me and process into all sorts of things. Like I've debated, like, do I want to go to a therapist that specializes in medical trauma? Because I've definitely been through some of that. Also, I have a whole new grasp on the concepts of both boredom and frustration that I feel I could really channel into characters pretty vividly. And yeah, like honestly, there's a work that I started doing toward the end of last year, almost as a joke at first, and then I'm just like, I actually have an idea here. And the main character's core conflict was kind of weak, and now I have a better understanding of what it's like to deal with a constant struggle that you feel is never going to end. And then what it feels like when you actually make progress and like get there. Like it sounds kind of corny and cliche, but it's one of those things where, the bad things in life teach you things the same way the good things in life teach you things. You definitely learn.
I mean, do you have like, so what are some of the lessons you think you've learned from this experience?
Oh my gosh. Don't get sepsis. No.
Words to live by.
Yeah. One of my friends had a great comment where it's like, yeah, any word that you can plug in the blank with, he died of blank, like anything that like comfortably fits into that phrase is not something you want to have. But gosh, I appreciate myself a lot more for who I am and what I mean to people. Like, to be perfectly honest, I was really scared, especially in the very beginning. Like, sepsis is a life-threatening condition, and to see how the people close to me reacted and responded to me being in a life-threatening situation, like, really hammered home, like, oh, yeah, I do mean a lot to these people. And, like, it was really heartening to see people go out of their way to help fill, some of my many, many, many hours of nothing to do and being trapped in a bed. I never knew that doing nothing could be so exhausting. Like, it's one of those things. And just the way that has now filled me with just this motivation, like, to just do stuff. Like, now that I can do stuff again, it's like I have to. Right? It's like, oh, like, I'm not like having been incapable of doing stuff. As soon as like I was in a position to just start taking even like small gig work again, it's like, yeah. Like, give me. It's like, oh, it's like, I know that like you're still recovering me. It's like, no, please, like, I need something to do with my time to distract me from everything that's going on. Like, I just like, I need to be doing something. Please give me work. And like, it's a good attitude to want to channel your stuff into something positive and productive. And man, that's a really deeply layered question. I'm sure I could give a very long answer about that if I kept going on.
It will be interesting. Like, you're very new out of this. You just had your doctor's appointment today, kind of giving you a all clear.
Yeah, like the last lingering bad stuff has like finally cleared up, and it's like, oh, I'm like 98% back to normal, which is a lot. I was really low down there for a very long time. Like I ran over this past weekend, I ran a Dungeons and Dragons session, and it was like one of those sessions where just like everything went off like bam, 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 like super like smoothly and like hitting all the notes I wanted to hit. Like everyone at the table brought their A game, and it's like, like my mental bandwidth of just not having to put up with all of this like stuff. It's just like, it's like, when Rock Lee throws off his shackles and now he's, that's an anime joke.
I was like, that's not one I know.
No.
Yeah, no, this is great. I'll be curious, I'm sure we'll follow up with this like again 6 months and a year to see how it may influence things like the way you read and characters that you read, and having gone through this experience, what resonates and changes in regards to just your interactions with the written word.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what my brain pumps out after this.
Did you happen to have a cute nurse there? Was there any Nightingale situations?
There was this one male nurse that I had while I was there, and like he was just like my total bro. He always made sure I got the good drugs whenever people needed to come by and do stuff. It's like, here, let me slip you some of those IV opioids before the nurses come to change your bandages. It's like, my man. We would commiserate about my roommate who he did not like.
You had some texts about that.
Yeah, we had some texts about the person that I was sharing a hospital room with for a few weeks. I will, for the sake of anonymity, I will say no more.
She'll be a character that shows up in your stories.
Yeah, she absolutely will be. I'm talking about my roommate's wife. I wasn't sharing a room with a woman. It was another guy, but his wife would come by frequently, and it's a small room. You overhear conversations. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that was a thing. Well, welcome back. We're so glad to have you.
Yay. Oh, and if if anyone out there wants to write in and ask questions about stuff that I went through, I don't mind that. I don't want to get too into detail about what actually like what I'm like, hey, what surgeries did you get? It's like, I don't need to tell the listeners about all that, but I'm much better after basically since this whole journey kind of started the day after Christmas, and I guess it ended today, April 8th.
3 months and 2 weeks ish.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Hey, Kyell.
Hi.
I heard there was some football that happened.
Yeah.
What can you tell us a little bit about that?
So, we had a Super Bowl. A lot of listeners may know because I made a big deal about it 5 years ago. No, 6 years ago. Was it 7? Anyway. At some point,
to me, November feels like 2 years ago.
Which was this Super Bowl? Was this 59? All right. Anyway,
58, maybe.
So, a while ago, I was very waggy because my hometown Philadelphia Eagles, where I grew up, not where I live now, not where I particularly want to go back to at this point, but I still have affection.
Our Appalachian foothill mountain bunker.
Yeah. The Philadelphia Eagles won their first Super Bowl, not their first championship, but their first championship of the Super Bowl era, and defeated the Patriots, whom everybody was pretty sick of by that point, even most of our friends from the Boston area. And so this past year, the Eagles made it to the Super Bowl again. They'd been there 2 years ago, and they lost to Kansas City on a suspiciously slippery field. But, both teams play on the same field, so you can't really say much about that. But they returned to play Kansas City, who's a team by this point that has used up most of the goodwill that they had 5 years ago when they got Pat Mahomes and everybody.
It was a brief dynasty.
He was the exciting young quarterback, and he was fun. He's turned out to not. I don't know. I should say, I've not seen much of a personality from him. His wife is conservative. Their kicker made some dumb remarks about women's place being in the home at a commencement speech. They've won the Super Bowl like 3 of the last 4 years, I think, something like that. So once again, the Eagles were in the Super Bowl against a team that everybody was tired of, which is pretty funny because very few people who aren't from Philly root for the Eagles during the regular season, and yet it seems every time they make it to a Super Bowl, people go like, I guess I'm rooting for Philly.
Okay, you plucky underdogs again.
And I had been following this team and been excited about the potential. They'd had a lot of shuffling around, but they had just ridiculous amounts of talent. The team seemed to be getting along better. The coach had been a second-year coach when they made it to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. He had learned. He'd lost his assistants. He'd gotten new ones. He'd fired them. He'd gotten new ones again this year. And a couple weeks into the season, they just started clicking, and they were fun to read about, and they were fun to watch. And they made it to the Super Bowl and just demolished the Chiefs, like beginning to end. There was not a point where the game was in doubt after like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
They, I think only the second time in Super Bowl history they did not blitz once. And
oh, wow.
Not a single time. They rushed 4 every single time, and Mahomes couldn't do anything against them. And they one of the fun things this year. I'm going on a lot about football, but I was so excited.
You've written 6-7 books on football, so
I know.
I think it's okay.
The New York Giants. Philly has a rivalry with all the other NFC East teams. Like, we don't like the Giants, we don't like the Cowboys, we don't like the Commanders. But the Giants had a running back who was great. Was one of the few bright spots, and they decided not to give him an extension and to let him go in free agency. And he drove down the New Jersey Turnpike to Philly and had a 2,000-yard season, which, for people who don't know football numbers, makes him, I think, the 4th person ever to do that.
It's like top 5 or something, yeah.
And that was with sitting out the last game because they'd already gotten their playoff position.
Yeah, it's like don't risk him.
They didn't need him to win. He was within like 100 some yards of the record, and they opted to sit him. And he said, if we win a Super Bowl, it'll all be worth it. But he was just so great. Had so many highlight plays, and then in the NFC Championship game against Washington, the first play the Eagles had, he broke a tackle and ran 70 yards for a touchdown. He did not score in the Super Bowl, but he was a huge factor, and you could see it because Kansas City decided, we're not going to let this guy beat us. We're going to make everyone else beat us. And so a lot of the plays they ran were to contain the run,
like a shutdown,
and that
play,
just opened up the rest of the field.
Yeah.
So, if you are interested, my favorite YouTube video from the game is there's about a 45-minute video of the game that is a compilation of all the players who were mic'd up. And so it's like Super Bowl mic'd up. And it's fun. There's so many great stories from this Eagles team. I could go on. Zach Bond was an edge rusher they got from New Orleans, who was mostly a special teamer. They converted him to linebacker, and he was an all-defense choice this year and was nominated for Defensive Player of the Year. They got a rookie out of Iowa who was his choice for Defensive Player of the Year, who got an interception return for a touchdown in the Super Bowl on his birthday. His 22nd birthday. 22 years old. Anyway, it was a very fun game. I know a lot of people would have wanted to see a more exciting game that was in doubt at any point, but I just enjoyed seeing the team click. Everyone got into it. Everyone had a good game.
Then Taylor Swift was forced to go into the East and diminish as Travis Kelce was crushed into a cube like a used car.
Oh, my God. Sorry, that just made me think of the halftime show, which was an amazing halftime show, too.
Oh, yeah. One for the books, that one. Mm-hmm. Learn that there's certain phrases that you're not supposed to sing on national TV, but the crowd will shout it anyway.
It was also like visually stunning, but
yeah, yes,
but yay! So much better than last year's Super Bowl, where most of the folks at our party were rooting for the 49ers, so they ended up being a very sad, quiet post Super Bowl experience. Everybody kind of shuffled off home. This one was much more of a celebration after the Super Bowl.
Both the 49ers Chiefs Super Bowls were in doubt in the fourth quarter. The 49ers, I think, were up in both of them.
They had a chance, but
yeah.
Kansas City has been historically very good at winning at the end. Well, awesome. It was a lot of fun. So that was a good update. I did ask the Soulful Academy if they had any quick questions for us. So I did get a couple questions in.
Ooh, right.
We were going to try to keep this episode a little bit shorter.
Oh, gosh.
But if you guys don't mind, why don't we jump into those real quick? I just telegrammed them to you if you have your phones.
That was that tingling buzz.
That was that tingling buzz. Kyell, I did one to you first. And then Ricky, yours is KM Hirosaki. Yours is a little bit longer as the second question. But Kyell, why don't you start with the first one?
All right. This is from Cassius Alexander. That sounds like a Roman general. I like it.
They have written this before.
Cassius Alexander.
Yeah.
How is the disposition of the troops?
Cousin of Cassius, like Antonius Scipio.
Yeah. What are some factors you consider when deciding whether a book should be turned into a series or left as a one-off? Do you go into the planning process expecting to write a series, or is it something more spontaneous? Do publishers factor into these decisions? The last question is the easiest one. No.
Yeah.
The other questions really, I was going to say, depend on which series of mine you're talking about, but I don't know that that's actually true. I guess Vol was the one I didn't know was going to be a series, but I had an inkling because I started with the short story The Prisoner's Release, which came out in Heat, and then I thought, I want to write a novel about this fox, and I want to place it before that story, and so I placed it before the story, and then I realized that there was also a novel to be written after the story, so I wrote that novel, so that series kind of organically grew. Out of Position, Love Match, Collations were all stories that were too big for one book. And I knew when I finished the first book that there were going to be more. Actually, maybe I think with Out of Position I knew about halfway through because I thought, oh, it's going to be this story. And then I got to the press conference part of the story and it was 120,000 words, and I thought, I have to stop. And this was a good place to stop. Collations I knew because I had the idea, and then it was too big for one book, so it was going to be 2 books, and then I had another idea, so it was going to be 3 books, and then one of my writing group people said, "Oh, I'm really looking forward to see you write about this," and I was like, "Well, damn it! Now there's 4 books." And Love Match was just one big story that wouldn't fit in a single volume, so it always had to be a series. The Dangerous Spirits series was not one that I knew was going to be a series heading into it. I thought Green Fairy was going to be a standalone. But at the end of that one, I enjoyed the book and the characters and the world and the setting and the conceit of it. I enjoyed all of that.
And then you
so
came up
much.
with a fun gimmick, which once you come up with that, you kind of have to.
Yeah, but that was the reason. That would have been the main reason it wouldn't have been a series, is because Green Fairy has 3 narratives interwoven, and so I thought, if I'm going to continue this series, I want to do that for each of the books, but I don't want to do it the same way.
Yeah.
And so I figured out a twist on it for Red Devil, and then another twist on it for Black Angel. And then
I remember when I was first reading Black Angel and I got to what was weird about that one, and I'm like, oh, okay. I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it, but you should be reading these if you listen to our podcast.
I'm really pleased with that series, and I'm excited.
It's one of the ones that stands out most in my memory for those things. I was actually just thinking about the Dangerous Spirit series, like literally just like a couple of days ago, and specifically how they're each named after a drink, and how you had to then find drinks that had the names that you wanted for them to be served in the story.
Yeah, the connection to the drink gets more tenuous after the first one, but yeah, I'm excited to be getting back to that series. I just finished a revision pass on Azure City, which is not part of that series. It doesn't have the interwoven narrative form, but it is those same characters, and it's the same kind of world, and I was very pleased about it. So I think that answers most of the question. Trying to keep it briefish.
Kind of. I mean, so I think
what else would you ask?
Well, I think the answer I was hearing is a little bit of both, in the sense that you don't necessarily go into it with the idea of doing a multi-book series, but you let the story unfold, and often the story ends up being a multi-book series, most often.
Yeah, I guess the first question was, what factors do you consider? The main factor is the story big enough to support multiple books? And
do you have ideas?
And did I enjoy writing the first one enough to keep writing them?
Yeah. Like I've never, like, I can't imagine like wanting to start a series and then writing the first one and then being like, never mind. Like, I feel like I would never get that far in an idea to get it to fruition if it was going to lose steam that quickly. I don't know.
Yeah. And the Wolftown series, like, it's fun that the series all feel different to me. The Wolftown series is very much modeled on the private detective series that I enjoyed reading, where every book is a different case, but there's an overarching story. That's modeled on the Nameless Detective series by Bill Pronzini, which are some of my favorite detective stories. But the Collations books are more modeled on a fantasy trilogy.
Yeah.
The Dangerous Spirits books are more, trying to think of an analogy to them, like maybe almost the Narnia series.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, and also, like, they reminded me a little bit of like something that Holly Black might write.
Yeah,
like, but with, more gay foxes.
Right. So
I wonder. So there's probably, actually, is there a word for this? And what I mean is, so there's series that you need the whole series to tell the story, where you end for book one and it's not really done.
Right.
A lot of the series you write that I've read, and there's some I haven't read yet, is pretty much each book is a standalone, but it is part of a series because you're continuing the story of a character, even though it was kind of a completed book.
So actually,
what's the difference between those two kind of series?
So, okay, like, actually, I have a relevant example from my own work here. Summerhill. Summerhill, first of all, was never intended to be a book. It was just supposed to be a short story. And then I got a bunch of feedback saying, like, this idea is too big for a short story and you need to do it justice by making it into a whole book. And I'm like, I hate that you're right. Because that was the next 3 years of my life. But that book ends in a way where if I never write a follow-up, like, that's cool. Like, there's imagined adventures that can go on after that book ends. But, like, I deliberately wrote it in a way where it's not going to be a surprise if I write another one, if that makes sense. Like, I've deliberately left it open without leaving it too open. At least that was my intent. Mm. Like, it ends with two characters going off together to have adventures beyond the core problems of the book. And it's like, I have some ideas for what some of those future adventures are. I kind of imagine it as a trilogy. All of the books begin with the letter S. They're all one-word titles with S. Poor Fuzzwolf. I had like a whole conversation with Fuzzwolf about what the first sequel to Summerhill was going to be like years ago at this point, and it never materialized. I wrote like chapter 1 and 2 like 3 times. That happens to me a lot, where I'll start something, I'm like, no, it's not right, I have to start. It's like, keep going, don't go back. Like, no, it started wrong, it's going to end. It's like cooking, where it's like, no, I just have to dump out what's in the pot and start over.
Don't bin it. So the Out of Position and Love Match series are the two that I think are a single story told over multiple books. Love Match especially. Love Match was just a thing I wrote serially on Patreon, and finding places to break the books was the hardest part of that. Because
if Dickens had the internet and was also a gay fox.
And the Out of Position books I did more deliberately, in that all of those books are meant to be chapters of the larger story.
Yeah.
Although Divisions and Uncovered are kind of the same chapter, just split into 2 books because of length reasons. Whereas for the Collation series, for Dangerous Spirits, for Wolftown, for the Argaea series, those all feel like stories that fall under a larger umbrella of the lives of these characters. And it's much less one story. So if I had stopped after Out of Position, people would have been fine with it. They would have said, "What happened next?" I'm like, well, I have ideas. But there was obviously more to tell at the end of that book. Whereas with Waterways, people still ask me what happened next, but that's so much more open-ended. The story that I was telling in that book ends in that book.
So maybe it is as simple as the story will dictate if it's a series or not.
Yeah, the story, I follow the story most of the time.
Okay.
For better or worse.
And I will say real quick, your comment about do publishers factor that? I would say, you said no. I would say maybe that's a little bit more on the small press side. Maybe some of the bigger publishers do try to factor that in, but we don't have a lot of touch to that. So my thinking being, if they see something that's going to make money, they want more money because they like money, and right. Series bring in money.
I feel like if you're looking into mainstream publishing, worry about having one book that somebody wants to pick up and release before you start thinking about series. It's hard enough to do even that.
So you have a money for me?
Yeah. Yes, sir, I do.
Yes. Awesome. Okay, thank you. Let's jump into the next one, Kim.
Yeah, so this is a good question. It's one that I have capital O opinions on when it comes to my answer, too. So this is from Zenit F. What would you suggest to a relatively inexperienced writer who hasn't shared their writing publicly in ages and finds themselves caught up in a moment of self-doubt? So that's interesting. You call yourself inexperienced, but you've been around long enough that you haven't posted stuff in ages. I might have something to say about that. I've seen plenty of other writers say practice your craft for your own sake or / write solely for yourself. And while I think the advice is sound in theory, likely a fault on my end rather than within the advice, I can't internalize it. Writing, quote, solely for myself feels like daydreaming with extra steps. Okay, that's actually a great turn of phrase. And I feel like writing with the intent for my work to be seen by at least one other person, it doesn't literally have to be seen by another person, though, is central to my philosophy of writing. I think I rely way too much on an audience I can either get feedback from immediately, or at the very least, imagine them as engaging with what I'm writing as I write it. The former isn't something I want to rely on to write, while the latter is something I can only sustain for very short periods of time. So yeah, I guess I'll sort of head on into this here since, like I said, I have opinions. I am one of those people where I had a really troubled relationship with what people thought about what I wrote and the feedback I was getting. Not because it was bad feedback, but because it was positive feedback that I disagreed with. And that is not a healthy way to deal with feedback from your readers. And so when you're talking about getting feedback from your audience is something that you really value as something that encourages you to write, that is good. But I just, as somebody who has struggled, make sure that you're going into that relationship with your audience with a good mindset, because it can be easier than you think to be in a bad mindset with that. But the main thrust of, I think, what you're asking here is, okay, the advice of, well, just write for yourself and don't worry about anyone seeing it. That is also advice that I have struggled with as well. But what I think you need to sort of keep in mind with advice like this is, you just need to write something. You need to be flexing those muscles or they will atrophy. You mentioned you haven't shared anything in a long time. I don't know if that means you haven't been writing in a long time, but you're also talking about how you only write to show people and you haven't been showing people stuff. Write dumb things just to be writing stuff. That's one of the things that Kyell and I, and also to some extent Kit, would do when we would do writing exercises. And not all of it is particularly good, but there would always be at least something about it that was worthwhile for having done one particular line that would just make people laugh, like that sort of thing. And just, man, writing is sort of like a sport or sort of like a physical activity where you need to keep up your practice or training or you'll go back to being worse at it.
I think you hit on a point there, and I want to clarify something about that piece of advice in light of what you said.
By all means, please do.
Idea of writing for yourself doesn't mean writing without the intention of showing it to other people.
Yeah.
And the distinction that I want to make is writing for yourself, to me, means write the things that make you happy. Write things that bring you joy, that express the things you want to express. Because, as you were saying, when you get into this relationship where you're writing for other people and you're saying, I'm going to show it to these friends of mine, I've got to make sure that I write something that they're going to like. Or I'm going to post it online, I need to make sure that I write something my audience is going to like. That is something that's out of your control.
Yeah.
And a big part of stress that we all have in our lives is all of these things that are out of our control. I think that where a lot of people get hung up and unable to write or lose the joy in writing is because they're focusing too much on things that are out of their control.
Yeah.
Will this audience like the things that I'm writing? Will this editor buy this short story? Will I be recognized for this? Will these people like it? Will these people like it? Etc. The only thing that is in your control is whether you enjoy the things you're writing. And I still believe that the healthiest writing practice is to write the things you enjoy writing and find the people who like to read the things you like to write, rather than saying, I'm going to try to get in good with this audience, or I'm writing to show these people, and tailoring your writing to them. So writing for yourself doesn't mean just write something and then don't show it to people, or you don't have to show it to people. It means write what you want to write.
Yeah. If you aren't excited about what you're writing, your writing will not be as good. I work professionally as a translator on a somewhat regular basis. And this is one of those cases where what I'm writing is dictated by what somebody else has already written. And so if it's a story or like it has characters that I just can't get behind, my translation into English isn't as good or as polished because I don't care as much. When I care and I'm like really into the characters, like their voice gets channeled through a lot more strongly, for example. I can tell when I've gotten a good handle on a character, either in translation or when writing original works, is when like their mode of speech comes through in a way where I can hear them talking as I'm writing their words, and like their dialogue comes with like whatever mannerisms they have. Like certain characters use a lot of contractions, certain characters don't. Like you don't need to throw your dot debayos into things. You don't. Yeah. That's another reference to the same anime I referenced earlier in the episode, if you're keeping score at home. And yeah, so the idea where you're hung up on, oh, what if nobody wants to read this? When I was working on the Seventh Chakra, that was a question I kept asking like people before it was like I was even done writing it. I'm like, are people in the furry fandom going to want to read a book about people who work for a weird religious institute? And also, the only banging that's going on is whenever somebody puts a bullet through a raccoon's head. Ta-da! That, if you've read the Seventh Chakra, you'll understand why that joke was hilarious.
I mean, honestly, when I wrote Out of Position, I thought, are a bunch of geeky furries going to want to read about football?
But a lot of people like really like the Seventh Chakra. They think it's. I've heard a lot of people say it's like my favorite thing that I've written from them, and like. I really wanted to write that story. Like I was super into writing the Seventh Chakra. I got a lot of really great help from all y'all in the writing group when I was doing that. But I'm glad that it shows that I was super into what I was writing when I did that. There are some old short stories on my FA / I guess So Furry. I think my So Furry account is still there. Is So Furry still a thing?
Still be there.
Someone let me know.
Yeah.
Still there.
Yeah. I know that I see 2 Mall pop up on Steam every so often. We're Steam friends. No, we both play Deep Rock Galactic. But yeah, no, that's I think that covers the rest of my thoughts.
Okay.
I swear there's no booze in this booze. So what's even happening?
0.5%. Just goes right to your head.
It does feel like, just to kind of summarize, the question is, I'm not satisfied writing for just myself, but also I don't have the audience to get feedback from, so what should I do? And I think that's a case where we talked about things, well, you talked about through your recovery learning patience.
Yeah, oh boy.
And I think patience and stubbornness are two things that you really need in order to be a writer.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is put your work up, post it somewhere. It's not necessarily going to get a ton of views, but if you post it to Furry, it'll get some. And then talk about it and tell people, I wrote this, if you feel like checking it out. And then
people around.
Produce work consistently, and eventually the audience will come.
Yeah. Like, it's also, like, just to stress, it's perfectly normal and natural to want an audience for the stuff that you're writing and to write because you want to share it with other people. That's what art is about, about sharing it with other people. But again, like, you just don't worry about how many people are reading it. Worry that the people who are reading it are getting what they want out of you and that you're giving them something that they value. Like, there have been days on stream where there have just been like one or two people in chat, and those people weren't even saying anything, but we still go on and do the show because that's what we do. We do the show, and people can still watch the videos later, and they do. I know people who sometimes are several weeks behind, but they make a point to spend the 3 hours it takes to listen to the two of us play through a game that I'm translating on the fly. And it blows my mind that anyone would want to do that, but they do. And that's part of what makes it fun.
So I guess what I would recommend is find at least one or two people who are willing to encourage your writing. These might be partners, they might just be friends, they might be random people who like your stories when you post them on the internet. And
not your mom, unless your mom is really good about being objective.
Yeah. And have that small group and read their writing as well if they are writers, or encourage them in whatever way they're encouraging you. But find those connections, because even a couple of those connections can make a huge difference.
Yeah. Also, like, for writers, it's great to have other writers as friends because they're the only people who can stand us.
Very true.
Not literally. I love you, my non-writer friends.
Which was a. I'm going to use this as a segue into our last question.
Sure.
But kind of following what you were saying, Kyell, building that community is going to be really important, and starting with just one person is totally fine. There's lots of ways to build that community. The fact that you asked that question in the SoFolf Academy means you're already part of a writing community. So, posting, I haven't checked yet, but posting your stories there is one way to interact with other writers. Interacting with other writers and readers is going to be really part of that journey.
Yeah.
Going to conventions, looking for writing panels at conventions, or hosting a writing panel at a convention, and then talking to the people in the audience. It's going to be really important to involve yourself in that community, which I know can be really hard for writers. But it's going to be really important.
Get your foot out there. The barrier to entry is actually super low.
It is. And that kind of is a nice segue into the last question. I'll keep this one really short, and I'll actually take this one. It's from Cassius also. Do you have any recommendations or resources for people trying to gain a deeper understanding of the business side of being an author?
Ooh.
Related to that, do you think being business-minded can be a boon for authors, or could it be a distraction from the art? I have thoughts on the last one, but I'll definitely get feedback from
as somebody who is
Kyell.
not business-minded. I think being business-minded could be a boon for anyone. I really wish I was better about money and math.
I think it can definitely be a boon for authors, simply because you're starting a small business when you become an author, and any understanding you have of how to run that business better is only going to help you. You may have to learn to compartmentalize so that your business manager is not looking over your shoulder while you're writing, but I think knowing business is definitely a help.
Yeah, I think the new modern writing market is such that you can't help but be a business person. The days of big publishers coming in and swooping people up is just, it's not what it was, and it's not going to go back to that anytime soon. So I think if you want to be a writer, you need to have a certain business mind to it. And I think there's degrees to that. There's lots of different channels where writing can be promoted these days. So I think there's lots of interesting opportunities, and this is a much deeper question, and I will be diving into this deeper in the Self Academy, but also I posted something with Buddy over at the Furry Chamber of Commerce just this last week. We had a brief conversation about it after I'd spent a bunch of time doing some analysis of Kyell's writing in the business side of that over the last month, basically. And it was interesting. There's lots of opportunities to do business. Recommendation of resources in the furry community. I think the Furry Chamber of Commerce is a good one. Talking to publishers.
I didn't know we had one of those.
We do. It's exciting. Talking to publishers, going to conventions and talking to publishers is good. Yeah. Talking to other authors who have published with presses is good as also, because they'll have different experiences and be able to provide you guidance.
This is the sort of thing where you really do need to go like right to the source, because it's not just out there for people to find.
Well, yes and no. There is.
I think if you're looking at it with specifically a furry bent,
yes.
Because as you mentioned yourself, like the furry publishing business and small press in general is a little different. And I think that if your goal is to be financially successful in furry markets, talking to furry publishers is going to be a very important thing. And it's not like there's any websites that are just like, so you want to talk about furry publishing, like, right? Like that's just not like a thing.
Yeah. I would agree with that. There's not really furry publishing. There are more. So you want to be an independent author publisher sites out there, or not publisher. You want to be an independent author business person. Mm-hmm. There's way more sites out there. And it really runs the gamut. There's a bunch that have really good advice. There's a bunch that are just grifters who are trying to get your dollar, promising you success. So be careful when you're out there looking for advice. There's a lot of advice out there, but to these guys' points, talk to your fellow authors, see what's working for them, share what you've done, what's worked and not worked. And really it's helping with that writing community on the business side is kind of the best way to move forward.
Yeah. Cause if you go online and you're looking about stuff, like a good 80% of what you're going to find if you're looking for how to be like successful at writing it's going to mostly be about how to get yourself a literary agent, which is a really important thing, but like it isn't really a thing in the furry publishing world. Like literary agents just kind of aren't a thing at our level of like granularity in the space between content creators and audience, right? Like it's a lot more narrowed down.
Or the other thing that is out there is how to become rich in self-publishing by putting your book on Amazon Kindle and advertising it on blah blah blah, and that doesn't really
how to game the algorithm and trick it,
and doesn't really work with the furry fandom.
But stay tuned. There's going to be a lot more conversations around the business side. I'm going to actually take that on as
gaming the algorithm. Is what species do people like? Put that on the cover.
Yeah,
souls.
I mean,
it's probably a canid. Spoiler, or maybe a cat.
Fox and tiger.
There you go. Boom. Got it in two.
All right, I think we will wrap it up. Again, it was great seeing you again, KM Hirosaki. Glad to have you back.
Yeah, I'm alive.
Good to be back here in the bunker with y'all.
All right, everybody. Kit Silver checking out.
This is KM Hirosaki. I talked right over you.
It's fine. They know our names.
They do. And they know that we love them.
We do. Good night, everyone.